A Trump-supporting Republican congressman was humiliated on national TV this morning when his bad faith and dishonesty were exposed by both the interviewer and, quite frankly, himself. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. As you know, Sunday mornings are when the flagship media programs have their sit-down conversations with Democratic and Republican politicians. So you have Fox News Sunday, CBS's Face the Nation, NBC's Meet the Press, et cetera, and so forth. And it usually makes for some pretty good content, particularly when the Republican politicians open their mouths. Now, very often they're given softball interviews by, centrist media that doesn't want to be seen as in the pocket for the Democratic Party, the Biden-Harris administration, or just the left in general. So they usually reserve the tough questions for the Democrats and grade the Republicans on a curve. But every now and then you get a really good journalistic moment. And we have one here. So we have a Trump-supporting Congressman, Tony Gonzalez of Texas, and he just crumbles. He just implodes due to some pretty professional questioning from the interviewer, pretty fair questions, but mostly he just set himself up for failure such that any person asking a fair and honest question would lead to this result. And the topic is the southern border. And as you know, if you follow this channel, the Republican Party in the era of Trump is replete with bad faith when it comes to the southern border. We will get into why, but I want you to see these clips from Tony Gonzalez confronted with facts about the situation of the southern border under the Biden-Harris administration today and how desperate he is to dishonestly reframe the issue.
People really know what we're talking about. All year long, the number of migrant encounters along the southern border was hovering a little below 200,000 a month. Then this executive order went into place in early June, and those numbers plunged to 100,000 in July. They were cut in half. Are you ready to call this move a success?
Nancy, it's great to be here. I represent nearly half of the overall southern border. I literally was on the border on Friday. What I can tell you is things are getting worse. And let me give you an example. So in the New Mexico area, to date, there's been 100 illegal immigrants that have perished, okay? Every part of the border is different. Parts of my district, it takes you 3 days humping through the desert in order to make it to the border. In the New Mexico area, it takes you 1 hour. So how is 100 people dying in 1 hour? The reason is these criminal organizations are holding these migrants in these stash houses.
So he's providing his interpretation of the data. The data being given to him is that actually, border crossings at the southern border, which you and your party have complained about, have precipitously dropped under the Biden administration. Are you prepared to say, since you were so critical, that, things are moving in the right direction? He doesn't say, hey, listen, there are still serious problems, and here's an example that, the administration needs to be held accountable for, needs to provide an answer for. He doesn't do that, which would be fair, perhaps partisan, but fair. Instead, what he says is, no. Despite the data you just gave me, things are actually worse at the southern border, even though encounters with undocumented migrants have precipitously declined. That one thing that we were complaining about for years, if not months, despite our reneging of a good faith deal between the Republicans and Democrats and independents. Again, we'll get into that. Things are worse. Pretty dishonest stuff. And the host kind of pushes back on that. Like, well, wait a minute. How can you say it's worse when the data show that things are getting better? And why are you so reluctant to give credit?
And you double down on that. We're not seeing any of that.
So you've been pushing for the administration to take executive action for years. They've now done it, and you're saying you're not happy about it, even though the numbers have come down so sharply?
Well, ask the 100 families that died. This is a part of the ugly part of it is so many people are dying. And those are the people that are dying. What about the people that are getting assaulted in other areas? It's getting worse. So people are looking at the numbers and thinking, oh, it's getting better. I look at it, who is coming over and what is happening to these people. In many cases, these criminal organizations, these Tran de Agua, TDA, they're...
It's hard to take Gonzalez's explanation here at face value because he and his party were exclusively complaining about the numbers when the numbers were politically beneficial for them. You can see where he kind of stammers there because even the host is like, well, wait a minute. You said things were terrible. You said the numbers were bad. You demanded that the Biden administration take action. They took unilateral executive action that may very well be challenged and struck down in court the way that when Trump was president and he attempted to take unilateral executive action at the southern border, he was repeatedly blocked, very often by conservative courts, which is why President Biden and Vice President Harris didn't want to take executive action, because they thought it was the most vulnerable. They wanted Congress to pass a law that the president would sign into law, which is stronger. It's less likely to be struck down by federal courts. You all pulled away from that in the 11th hour because Donald Trump demanded that you do so. So then, left with no choice, the president kind of threw a Hail Mary and took executive action. And we are seeing a precipitous decline in the very numbers you complained about. And you won't give him credit for it. You won't say things are getting better. And then he tries to do what many politicians do, which is appeal to very harrowing stories. And it would be, as I said in the beginning, it would be fine if he said, listen, here are some terrible things that are still going on at the southern border, which need to be addressed. And he, for sheer politics, for cynical politics' sakes, he could even blame the Biden administration for it. I think that would be bad faith, but whatever. At least it would be understandable. He won't acknowledge the data because the data is inconvenient to him and his political party. So then he tries to appeal to your emotions. If the shoe was on the other foot, if it were a Trump administration, because believe it or not, people died at the southern border tragically under both the Biden and Trump administrations. Republicans didn't care when it was under the Trump administration. They would point to numbers. Listen, these anecdotes are tragic. What did the numbers say? You see how the standard shifts? That's my frustration. If Congressman Gonzalez wanted to draw attention to tragedies that are still going on at the southern border, he should do that. That actually might be responsible of him to do. Then he could actually say, hey, listen, as a matter of fact, this is why I'm calling on both the Democrats and my party, the Republicans, to come together and negotiate in good faith to address this issue at the southern border. Instead, he's using it as a cynical campaign wedge issue. After co-signing a party and co-signing a movement that stepped away from good faith negotiation to deal with this very problem. You see how the whole thing is circular. This is what Republicans do. They point fingers at a problem, help exacerbate a problem, and then complain that the problem isn't being addressed. And then when Democrats try to address the problem on their own after Republicans make it more difficult, then the Republicans say, well, you haven't solved all the problem. And actually, the parts of the problem that you have addressed, not only is it not good enough, it's actually worse. Very strange bad faith stuff. And that's why I think it's important to remember that, as far as I'm concerned, the Republicans, they own the issue at the southern border. They own it. I understand that it didn't begin entirely with just the Republican Party, that the situation at the southern border has transcended multiple administrations. President Bush had issues at the southern border. President Obama had issues at the southern border. Donald Trump, when he was president, had issues at the southern border. He helped trigger a government shutdown because he felt that his southern border projects, the wall in particular, were insufficiently funded. He also repeatedly publicly challenged Congress to pass sweeping border legislation. Then again, he took executive action. Very often it was struck down by the courts. So there were bad situations at the southern border under Trump. And then, of course, there's been a bad situation under President Biden as well. This is a multi-party, multipolar situation. But Republicans only know how to point the finger. And in divided government, they should be working in good faith. They don't have what many conservative Republican politicians will say, hey, listen, that bipartisan border bill, even if Trump didn't publicly and privately lobby for us to not pass it, it wasn't perfect. It didn't give us everything we wanted. Well, no, of course not. Because what you all want, what conservative Republicans want and progressive Democrats want, are very often different things. And so that's why in divided government, you have to compromise. And that bipartisan border bill was much more conservative than it was progressive. I mean, my God, for everything we got, we gave away 2 or 3 different things, provisos to the Republicans. And they're like, well, we wanted it all. Yeah, but you're not in a position to get it all because you don't control the White House. You don't control the Senate. You don't get to be the tail that wags the dog. We have to give some stuff up. You have to give some stuff up. And that is why, as a reminder, Republican senators James Lankford, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and many others were publicly pleading with Trump and more stalwart Trump allies in Congress to not make this a political football and to actually pass this bill. It was endorsed by the Trump-loving Border Patrol Union because they thought it was better than nothing and it was meaningful. But Trump killed it anyway for cynical political purposes. So I just want to play these clips as a reminder because it's always good to have these Trump cards in your back pocket.
We all felt that the border was a complete disaster, myself included. And Chad, you remember covering the phases we went through. First, there was an effort to make law, which requires you to deal with Democrats. And then a number of our members thought it wasn't good enough. And then our nominee for president didn't seem to want us to do anything at all. That took months.
There you go. That's Mitch McConnell publicly saying that Donald Trump not wanting Republicans to do anything on the southern border, again, for purely cynical political reasons, cost them months of time and good faith negotiations and probably cost, countless people lives as well and issues at the southern border because all of the efforts towards negotiation were for naught. It wasn't because there was a good faith disagreement on uncompromised details. The deal was worked out between James Lankford, Republican, conservative Republican, Kyrsten Sinema, conservative ex-Democrat turned independent, and Chris Murphy, liberal Democratic senator, again, tend to skew more right collectively than what Republicans are trying to say about the bill now. It wasn't just Mitch McConnell, by the way. I know he and Donald Trump have had their beef. Lindsey Graham, who loves Donald Trump, is a Trump sycophant. He said the same damn thing.
And I regret that. So everybody who comes on this floor and says our border's broken, we should do something about it, you're absolutely right. And unfortunately, we didn't get there. President Trump opposed a Senate bill. We couldn't find a better way forward.
It's on Trump. And so I think Gonzalez was just humiliated. I think even the look on the host's face, like, wait a minute, you said this was a problem. You demanded that the Biden administration take action on this problem. They did. The problem is clearly objectively reduced. And not only will you not give them credit, you're saying the situation is worse. That's pretty absurd. And you can see, which is, again, why you stammered through the answer. Well, it's worse. You got to tell that to people who are still affected by it. That's why it's not just imperfect, it's worse. That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And that's why I just don't take any Republican congressman or politician particularly seriously when it comes to their emotional appeals, because if they really cared about this issue, in my opinion, they would have worked in good faith with the Democrats to address this months ago. That's just my opinion. You let me know what you think in the comments.